How are you doing today? In this video, we're going to be talking about some books again. A lot of you really seem to enjoy my last sort of book recommendation video that I did, and I got a lot of requests to make another video in the same style, and I've been thinking about how to do that differently, but still in a way that would be the same format. I didn't want to just do the exact same thing and be super boring. So this kind of is the exact same thing, but I'm hoping it's going to be a little bit less than super boring for some of you, because I decided to do a World of Warcraft themed book review. I have a lot of WoW books here in front of me, and also some more next to me on the floor. So there are a lot of books here to talk about. Actually, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I have 14 of the lore books here in front of me, and I am just going to kind of do something similar where I'm just gonna talk a little bit about the book. Actually, a long time ago now, someone had asked me, I think on Instagram, advice about like what order to read the lore books in, and I feel terrible because I never replied, even though I had every intention to. So maybe through the course of this video I can kind of come up with an answer that is sufficient. I didn't want to just throw anything out there, and there are a lot of books, and some of them like jump around in time, so it was really hard for me off the top of my head to just say, oh, you should read them in this order. And I'm sure that there's like a flowchart online or something that really talks about what the best order to read these is. But for me personally, I only have really one major rule, which is to not read this book called War Crimes. This has to be like one of the last books that you read, certainly up until this point in time in the lore, if that makes sense. So like I'll talk about this book in a minute. I don't know if I want to start with this book because I don't want to give anything away by accident, and that's another thing. I'm really only going to be reading covers and kind of giving my opinion of these books. I'm not going to give any spoilers or plot details beyond that, similarly to my last video. So don't worry about me like spoiling anything. These books are hundreds of pages of some of the best fantasy writing that I've ever in my life encountered. So so this book in particular, War Crimes by Christie Golden, I would say hold off, and I'll explain why. Aside from that, I don't have any hard and fast rules or suggestions off the top of my head at the moment, but like I said, perhaps as we sort of journey through all of these stories, I might have a little bit of advice. Okay, so there are a number of different authors that have written for World of Warcraft lore, and I should probably be clear that this is for the lore that coincides with World of Warcraft, the multi-expansion game, MMORPG that has been popular and you've probably heard of. This is not the lore, this is not the same lore for like the original Warcraft game or anything like that. Some of it might be similar. I don't know because I've never played Warcraft, and I've never read a lot. I mean, I've read some of the lore, but not a lot to be like any kind of authority on that whatsoever. So, that being the case, all I know is that this is for the World of Warcraft. So, there are a number of authors that have written for this sphere, and all of them are great. I would never put down anyone's work. I've felt a lot of emotions throughout all of these books. I don't have anyone that I'm like, I don't really like them. And that's kind of a mean thing to say anyway. It's really cool that these writers were able to develop these storylines at all. So I'm kind of just thankful that they all exist. That being said, I tend to favor Christy Golden's writing style. And the only reason why not the only reason, but another reason I guess why she really sticks out to me is because she wrote one of the books that made me more emotional than any other book I've ever read in my life. Which is kind of funny because it's like a World of Warcraft book, but like it was just so beautifully written and the characters were so lovable and the situations that happened were so well written that I was just in it and I was so dedicated to the story and everything, and it really rocked me. That was like the biggest book hangover that I've ever had in my life. Like I was depressed for days after I finished reading it, and like when someone does that to you, I mean that's an amazing thing. Like that's really cool, awesome art. So I'm a huge nerd fan of Chrissy Golden. I follow her on Twitter and she's really cute, and she has these cats that she named Sylvanas and Anduin, and now she works for Blizzard like full-time, and she's written for like a whole bunch of other fantasy series as well, I think including like Star Trek and some other it probably says on one of these books. I'm not sure, I'll check as we go along, but she's written for a lot of other fantasy series as well. Anyhow, she's super cute and her writing is just, the style really, really works for me. I think it's so vivid and beautiful and it really draws me in. So, but let's just quickly talk about who all the different authors are. I think that this is all the books. There may be a couple that I'm missing, but this is the majority of the collection that I know of that's published and available. So there are 3 books that I have, 4, that are written by authors that I've never really seen again. And that's another thing, is that Christy Golden has written like a lot of the stash here, so she also has a bigger selection to pick from. But this was one of my favorite stories actually, and one of my first stories I think I read, and this is by Keith R.A. DiCandido. So this is the only book I have by him. And then let's see, there's a book. This is The Tides of Darkness, which was written by Aaron Rosenberg. A-A-R-O-N, not E-R-I-N. Aaron Rosenberg, and that's the only book I have by him as well. And then I have 3 books that were written by Richard Knack. Actually, 4 if you count the one in the archive. The Sundering here is one of his, by Richard Knack. Sorry, my dog's hair Christie Golden. And then in this archive book, this is actually a collection of 4 different novels packed into one. So there are 4 authors that share the pages here, and they are Richard Knack, again, Christie Golden, Jeff Grubb, and Chris Metzen, which, if you're a fan of the Blizzard Enterprise, you probably know Papa Metzen. Chris Metzen is one of the main devs of the game in the first place, and this was actually the only full-length story novel, as far as I'm aware, that he ever wrote and contributed, and it's really good. So I wish that he had written more, but yeah, so these 4 novels in here are Day of the Dragon, Lord of the Clans, The Last Guardian, and Of Blood and Honor. Then there's William King, who wrote the Illidan book that was very pivotal in the release of the Burning Legion expansion. And then the last one, who was a one-hit for me, is Michael A. Stackpole, who did Shadows of the Horde, which was really good too. I don't know if he's written any other WoW books or not. So here we have a number of stories now, and I guess what we're gonna do is just sort of go through them one at a time, and I'll kind of read the back cover and talk about what I remember about the story without giving anything away. Yeah, so let's get started. I guess we can start with... Okay, so I'm not sure. I don't remember which of these is the oldest. Literally in the lore, which is the oldest. But I think it would be the... Maybe, I don't know. Whoops, wrong one. There we go. Okay, I think it would be this trilogy here. Would be the... Is that upside down? Yes, it is. Okay, here we go. I think this 3-book series by Richard Knack would probably be, historically, in terms of World of Warcraft, the oldest. A lot of the newer lore books for WoW, they sort of fill in the space in between expansions, if that makes sense. So right before a new expansion will come out, there will be a novel that goes along with it that explains how we got to where we are. So each of these sort of newer books that I have do that. They serve that function. They act as a bridge between one expansion and another. But some of these earlier lore books, there was no expansion change, there was no game when these things were happening in time. So even if we are eventually taken to these places in the game and get to somewhat experience them, we weren't technically there when these things happened, so they don't correlate with any specific expansion whatsoever. These are independent stories that happened thousands of years ago, and I think that this is such a cool trilogy, so cool. Definitely, I think these are the only ones I have that are really supposed to go all together like this, but God, they're just so well written. So this is the first one. It's called The Well of Eternity. Okay, and if you play the game again, you'll probably recognize this name, The Well of Eternity, because it was a dungeon, and they sort of take us back in time to experience these things that happened thousands of years ago. And all three of these books were a part of that. I'm trying to remember which expansion that was, where they had those dungeons, one of them being the Well of Eternity. Was it Legion or I don't know if it was as far back as Cataclysm. I'm trying to think who I ran the dungeons with to please myself in time, but either way, you know what I'm talking about if you play the game. If not, it doesn't matter, because all of these books are standalone things that you can read whether or not you play the game. They're just really good fantasy. And honestly, I feel like the majority of people who play World of Warcraft don't even know the stuff that's in these books. You don't have to. They're not like bound to one another. If you play the game, you can play the game and have a lot of fun and learn a lot and enjoy all of it without ever knowing any of the lore. And if you read the lore and you don't play the game, you're not missing anything that it takes to understand the books. So hopefully that made sense. So the back cover of this says, "Many months have passed since the cataclysmic battle of Mount Hyjal, where the demonic Burning Legion was banished from Azeroth forever. But now a mysterious energy rift within the mountains of Kalimdor propels 3 former warriors into the distant past, a time long before orcs, humans, or even high elves roamed the land. A time when the dark titan Sargeras and his demon pawns persuaded Queen Ashara and her highborn to cleanse Azeroth of its lesser races. A time when the dragon aspects were at the height of their power, unaware that one of their own would soon usher in an age of darkness that would engulf the World of Warcraft." In the first chapter of this epic trilogy, the outcome of the historic War of the Ancients is forever altered by the arrival of 3 time-lost heroes. Crassus, the dragon mage whose great power and memories of the ancient conflict have inexplicably diminished. The human wizard Ronan, whose thoughts are divided between his family and the seductive source of his now growing power. And Broxagar, a weathered orc veteran who seeks a glorious death in combat. But unless these unlikely allies can convince the demigod Cenarius and the untrusting night elves of their queen's treachery, the Burning Legion's gateway into Azeroth will open anew. And this time, the struggles of the past may well spill over into the future. It's so good, and Crassus and Broxagar are definitely 2 of my more favorite characters. I really like Ronan too, but he actually, I think, ended up annoying me in the game during one expansion. But he has a cool story too, and I think if I remember right, his wife is not, he's a human, but his wife is not. And I think they have twins or something. I don't know. He had a cool family story, if I remember right. I also want to say that I've read all of these books like multiple times, and when I'm reading for pleasure, my memory just doesn't really take in a lot of stuff. Like, I get so swept up in the story that I usually remember most of it, but there are a lot of details that I might not catch the first time around because they're not what I'm interested in at that moment, or because I'm so excited to find out about some other detail. I'm not a perfect reader the first time through, and even though I've read these more than once, I don't have perfect recall about storylines, and these books have so many storylines in them. It's not just like one thing, one path that's linear. They jump back and forth from different perspectives, different people's thoughts and conversations, different continents, different everything. So it's really hard for me to keep all of it in my mind perfectly. So again, I'm not going to try to say anything that I don't remember exactly, but I always have like a general feeling that I'm left with after I've read a book, and some like major points that stuck out to me. So yeah, I think that's sufficient for what we're doing here, in terms of like a review or telling you what I think about the books. I think that, like I said, this trilogy is awesome, so I don't really have a whole lot more that I want to share because I don't want to spoil anything, but this is really cool. There's time traveling in this book, and you get to follow around these characters, Brox, Crassus, and Ronan, and it's very interesting. The dynamics, and just also like seeing how the different races interact, and getting to read their culture, their dialogue and stuff. It's really cool, and everything just feels so well developed because it is. And so therefore I guess the storylines have a really good chance of being complicated and still working, and being not hard to follow, but hard to predict sometimes. And they still are incredibly captivating just because everything's so well developed. This one, I unfortunately have like a gash down the back of the book right through the synopsis, so I'm gonna try to read it anyway, but I might mess up. Okay, so this one is called Demon Soul. Led by the mighty Archimond, scores of demonic soldiers now march across the lands of Kalimdor, leaving a trail of death and devastation in their wake. At the heart of the fiery invasion stands the mystic Well of Eternity, once the source of the Night Elves' arcane power. But now the well's energies have been defiled and twisted, for Queen Ashara and her highborn will stop at nothing to commune with their newfound god, the fiery lord of the Burning Legion, Sargeras. The Night Elf defenders, led by the young druid Malfurion Stormrage and the wizard Crassus, fight a desperate battle to hold back the Legion's terrible onslaught. Though only embers of hope remain, an ancient power has risen to aid the world in its darkest hour. The dragons, led by the powerful aspect Neltharion, have forged a weapon of incalculable power, the Dragon Soul, an artifact capable of driving the Legion from the world forever. But its use may cost far more than any could have foreseen. So you can kind of hear what's going on in this period of time. Malfurion is just a young boy, learning in his druid ways, and Crassus is out in the field. You guys, if you play, you might remember Crassus, if that name is kind of ringing a dim bell. He is the number one consort to Alexstrasza, the red dragonflight, queen of life. I can't really call him her husband because they don't really think or operate like that, but that's kind of like her mate, her soulmate, I guess. But most beautiful love stories of all time, in my opinion. I love it. So he's out in the field though right now, and all dragons in the World of Warcraft they can take on non-dragon forms. So they don't have to turn into a human. They can look like a gnome or a night elf or Draenei or whatever they want to, of the like lower races, lower classes, which would be like the things that you can play if you are a member of, like, if you play the game, if you play World of Warcraft. Almost any race that you can choose, a dragon can kind of turn into, to be, I guess, just to be like more inconspicuous if they need to, which is pretty cool. And also, you might know Neltharion. In the first book cover, kind of like hinted that something was about, they were like talking about how the black dragonflight, or that the dragons in general didn't know that one of their own was about to, have trouble. And then in this one, they finally say Neltharion, who is the black dragonflight leader. So this is also going along his storyline of dealing with the demon soul and becoming crazy and all of that stuff that you might remember from playing the game. And again, these aren't like real spoilers because you really have to read the book to understand what's going on. I could never really say just basic plot points and give anything away, truly. And if you do play the game but you've never really like concentrated on the lore, you might be really interested to read the books. Like, it adds a lot of really cool context, and I feel like after every time I read a WoW book, when I play World of Warcraft, I'm like twice as immersed because I have those stories, I guess, in my head, so it just makes everything seem more real in a way, which is really fun. I don't know, I know some people are kind of snotty about like role playing, and I don't really role play in the game or anything, but I still have kind of like a respect for just the story and the magic of it, I guess, more than most people. I read all the quests and stuff like that. Okay, so this is the last book of the trilogy, and it's called The Sundering. And the back says, "The hour of wrath draws near. The valiant night elves have been shattered by the loss of their beloved general. The black dragon Neltharion has claimed the demon soul and scattered the mighty dragonflights to the winds. Above all, the demon lord Archimonde has led the burning legion to the very brink of victory over Kalimdor. As the land and its denizens reel from this unstoppable evil, a terror beyond all reckoning draws ever nearer from the well of eternity's depths." In the final apocalyptic chapter of this epic trilogy, the dragon mage Crassus and the young druid Malfurion must risk everything to save Azeroth from utter destruction. Banding together the dwarves, Tauren, and Furbolg races, the heroes hope to spark an alliance to stand against the might of the burning legion. For if the demon soul should fall into the legion's hands, all hope for the world will be lost. This then is the hour where the past and future collide. So, super cool book, and the ending of this trilogy, as you can tell, I guess I'll just say this. You may know this already, you may not. I'm just gonna say it the one way though for everyone universally. So Azeroth is the planet that all of these characters, including us who play the game, live on, fight on, eat and breathe on, okay? Azeroth is actually like a living kind of thing, like the idea of the earth as like a living organism. Azeroth is like a step further than that. She's like a sleeping kind of giant, if you want to think of it that way, functioning as our planet. And this situation with Sargeras and the Burning Legion that you've maybe heard about now a few times, or you might know about very well, has been happening like cyclically for thousands of years. And every time, you know, it's like the people think that they beat the Burning Legion, and every time it's not true. So allegedly now that threat is really truly over in the game and in like reality currently, because we beat the head honchos of that kind of group that were constantly out to tamper with our planet and us on it, or some of us on it, really all of us on it. So now that that threat is gone, like the series kind of circulates around other things, but there were other storylines that were happening too in the meantime. It's not always about the Burning Legion, but they are recurring quite a lot. The Burning Legion is kind of like just our arch rival over and over again. So this trilogy is like before the Horde and Alliance ever even existed. This is one of the first times that we Azerothians fought against the Burning Legion, and Malfurion was there and Crassus was there. They're very old. So Malfurion was, I mean, poor guy, he's really had to fight off this incredible evil in his life multiple times. So that's a lot. So the next one that I think, again, I don't know that this is in order, but I think the next one would be, wait. Okay. Okay, so this book right here is The Rise of the Horde. This is many, many years later from the trilogy that we were just looking at, and at this point in time, Thrall is already a war chief of the Horde. So this is jumping forward quite far in time, but this is at the very beginning of his war chiefdom. But I know I have another book here that was before this, and I wonder if it's, I wonder if I even, okay, so unless I run into it later, I must have The enigmatic orc known as Thrall has been all of these. Raised from infancy by cruel human masters who sought to mold him into their perfect pawn, Thrall was driven by both the savagery in his heart and the cunning of his upbringing to pursue a destiny he was only beginning to understand, to break his bondage and rediscover the ancient traditions of his people. Now the tumultuous tale of his life's journey, a saga of honor, hatred, and hope, can at last be told. So, that book is definitely next, as far as I'm aware, chronologically. Actually, the one that comes before that in this same book might be chronologically earlier, which is Day of the Dragon. So I guess let's do that one first. A terrifying upheaval among the highest ranks of the world's wizards sends the maverick mage Ronin on a perilous journey to the orc-controlled lands of Cosmodon. What Ronin uncovers is a vast, far-reaching conspiracy darker than anything he ever imagined. A threat that will force him into a dangerous alliance with ancient creatures of air and fire if the world of Azeroth is to see another dawn. I think that one is next. So you have the trilogy, and then Ronin, one of the characters from the trilogy, has that next story, and then the very next story is Thrall's upbringing, which is one of my favorites. Some of you linguists may know this, but Thrall actually means slave. Thrall is not his real name. That is what he is called because he grows up as a slave. So it's kind of just like calling someone boy or, other derogatory, offensive terms to diminish his quality as a, being with thoughts and feelings. His story is just so good. It's honestly one of my favorites, and I'm wondering now. Yeah, it's written by Christy Golden, go figure. It's really, really good though. So emotional and so intense. And if you think you know Thrall, you don't until you've read that story, and it's so cool to see how he develops and what he becomes and what he came from. So that's pretty cool. And then the other two books in this archive, I think, are just right after these two as well, so that's kind of lucky. One of them is called The Last Guardian. The Guardians of Tearsfall were a line of champions imbued with godlike powers, each one through the ages charged with fighting a lonely secret war against the Burning Legion. Medivh was fated from birth to become the greatest and most powerful of this noble order, but from the beginning a darkness tainted him, corrupting his soul and turning to the evil powers that should have fought for good. Medivh's struggle against the malice within him became one with the fate of Azeroth itself, and changed the world forever. That is also one of my favorite stories, and I think that it's written by Jeff Grubb. Oh my gosh, that one takes place in Karazhan. Some of you may know that. It's a raid. It's a huge, cool, tower where all this crazy, funky, magical, time warping stuff happens, and actually Karazhan in the lore books is even more exotic and zany, I guess, than it is in the game. So it's so cool to read through that. If you like Karazhan, you the cycle of hatred. These are for later on, like I said, the rise of the horde, which actually, when I started my ASMR channel, I read this book chapter by chapter in an hour-long installments as ASMR video, and unfortunately I realized after the fact, as I was starting to become more popular and like get monetized and everything and read about copyright and all that, that was not an okay thing to do. So even though I put like so many hours into reading this book, and I had to like slam the door on so many people's faces who are in the middle of reading it with me, and I'm sorry about that still, but I didn't want to get in trouble, and also I don't want to take away from one of my favorite writers, and to be like, hey, I'm gonna make a free audiobook and no one has to buy your book. That's so good. So I made them private, I took them down. But yeah, Rise of the Horde is the book that kind of talks about everything that happens in Warlords of Draenor, I guess. And again, when we experienced that in the game, we were going back in time. So this actually happened a long time ago, but we just experienced it later because we were time hopping. Does that make sense? I didn't read this, did I? This says, oh wait, did I don't know. Though the young war chief Thrall ended the demon curse that had plagued his people for generations, the orcs still wrestle with the sins of their bloody past. As the rampaging horde, they waged a number of devastating wars against their perennial enemy, the Alliance. Yet the rage and bloodlust that drove the orcs to destroy everything in their path nearly consumed them as well. Long ago, on the idyllic world of Draenor, the noble orc clans lived in relative peace with their enigmatic neighbors, the Draenei. But the nefarious agents of the Burning Legion had other plans for both of the suspecting races. The Demon Lord Kil'jaeden set in motion a dark chain of events that would succeed not only in eradicating the Draenei, but forging orc clans into a single, unstoppable juggernaut of hatred and destruction. So this is like kind of the second coming of the Burning Legion, and this is also partially what happens in the Warcraft movie. So if you ever watched or will watch Warcraft the movie, the DVD, it is a mixture of like Karazhan and that book. A couple storylines they skip, some big stuff to make it all fit into the movie, but essentially that follows that similar path, so it's still worth reading the book. Actually, the movie isn't even 100% accurate, so it's well worth reading the book. Okay, and then in Cycle of Hatred, this is actually after, I think this is after, let me see here. I think this comes next. I'm not 100% sure. I don't totally remember this book that well. I remember one of the main relationships pretty well, but it's been a long time since I read this one, and I can't be sure, so I'll just read the back panel for you. The Burning Legion has been defeated, and eastern regions of Kalimdor are now shared by two nations. search to uncover the truth behind the attacks leads her to a shocking revelation. Her encounter with a legendary, long-lost wizard will challenge everything that she believes and illuminate the secret history of the World of Warcraft. I think that is right after Rise of the Horde, I'm not sure. Okay, we're getting down, kind of making a dent into the pile now. So this, I think, is around the same time period too, because it's also kind of talking about like the beginnings of the Horde and Alliance and their sort of relationship together. It says, after killing the corrupt war chief Blackhand, Orgrim Doomhammer was quick to seize control over the Orcish Horde. Now he is determined to conquer the rest of Azeroth so that his people will once again have a home of their own in the World of Warcraft. Anduin Lothar, former champion of Stormwind, has left his shattered homeland behind and led his people across the Great Sea to the shores of Lordaeron. There, with the aid of the noble King Tyrannus, he forges a mighty alliance with the other human nations. But even that may not be enough to stop the Horde's merciless onslaught. Elves, dwarves, and trolls enter the fray as the two emerging factions vie for dominance. Will the valiant alliance prevail, or will the Horde's tide of darkness consume the last vestiges of freedom on Azeroth? So this actually must have been a lot older, because Orgrim, Doomhammer, Blackhand, they're all like the generation above Thrall. And same with Anduin Lothar. He was like best friends with King Varian Wrynn, so the Alliance's current king's father. So that book actually might be a little older, but I'm not 100% sure about when it would have fallen with everything else. But it's kind of like a standalone book, so I don't think it'll matter that much. Some of these other ones, if you don't know the backstory, it's very confusing to be 100% on board. It's still possible to read the books and be fine, but you might just not get some stuff. I guess you won't notice, so it won't matter anyway. The next one I think would be Arthas. Oh man, what a book. The Rise of the Lich King. Man, this is even a New York Times bestseller. This book is so good. It tells Arthas' story, which is sad and emotional and intense and scary at points. So, let's see, it says, his evil is legend, lord of the undead scourge, wielder of the Runeblade Frostmourne, and enemy of the free people of Azeroth. The Lich King is an entity of incalculable power and unparalleled malice. His icy soul, utterly consumed by his plans to destroy all life on the World of Warcraft. But it was not always so. Long before his soul was fused with that of the orc shaman Ner'zhul, the Lich King was Arthas Menethil, Crown Prince of Lordaeron and faithful paladin of the Silver Hand. When a plague of undeath threatened all that he loved, Arthas was driven to pursue an ill-fated quest for a runeblade powerful enough to save his homeland. Yet the object of his search would exact a heavy price from its new master, beginning a horrifying descent into damnation. Arthas's path would lead him through the Arctic northern wastes toward the frozen throne. Arthas's really get to see a lot more of the character's depth and dimension when you read the book rather than just playing the game. So that's always cool. Gosh, what would be next? I can't actually remember. Okay, so this is later. I think the next would be Thrall, Twilight of the Aspects, which is a bit later in time. Actually, it's over 10,000 years later from the trilogy. So here we go. When Azeroth was young, the noble titans appointed the 5 great dragonflights to safeguard the budding world. Each of the flight's leaders was imbued with a portion of the Titan's vast cosmic powers. Together, these majestic dragon aspects committed themselves to thwarting any force that threatened the safety of the World of Warcraft. Over 10,000 years ago, a betrayal by the maddened black dragon aspect Deathwing shattered the strength and unity of the dragonflights. His most recent assault on Azeroth, the Cataclysm, has left the world in turmoil. At the Maelstrom, the center of Azeroth's instability, former Horde warchief Thrall and other accomplished shamans struggle to keep the world from tearing apart in the wake of Deathwing's attack. Yet a battle also rages within Thrall regarding his new life in the shamanic earthen ring, hampering his normally unparalleled abilities. Unable to focus on his duties, Thrall undertakes a seemingly menial task from an unexpected source, the mysterious green dragon aspect Ysera. This humble endeavor soon becomes a journey spanning the lands of Azeroth and the timeways of history itself, bringing Thrall into contact with ancient dragonflights. Divided by conflict and mistrust, these dragons have become easy prey to a horrific new weapon unleashed by Deathwing's servants, a living nightmare engineered to exterminate Azeroth's winged guardians. Of even greater concern is a bleak and terrifying possible future glimpsed by Ysera, the Hour of Twilight. Before this apocalyptic vision comes to pass, Thrall must purge his own doubts in order to discover his purpose in the world and aid Azeroth's dragonflights as they face the Twilight of the Aspects. So this was the Cataclysm intro book. Really good, interesting, not my favorite of all of the whole pick, but still a really good book. And if you like following Thrall's story, then it's definitely a great book. There's nothing wrong with it. but another disastrous turn of events looms on the horizon. Garrosh Hellscream is mustering the Horde's armies for an all-out invasion of Theramore. Despite mounting dissent within his faction, the brazen war chief aims to usher in a new era of Horde domination. His thirst for conquest leads him to take brutal measures against anyone who dares question his leadership. Alliance forces converge on Theramore to repel the Horde onslaught, but the brave defenders are unprepared for the true scope of Garrosh's cunning and deceptive strategy. His attack will irrevocably transform Jaina, engulfing the ardent peacekeeper in the chaotic and all-consuming tides of war. Oh man, so good. I can't even talk about this book. I'm gonna cry. It's just the best. And that was portrayed in a lot of ways in the game. Like, there were scenarios that happened in Theramore, if you remember. All of those kind of lead-in quests to the next expansion were based on the lore from that book, which is my favorite, obviously. And then we had the war crimes. I think this is next. I only have 3 left aside from this one, and I can't remember where. I think this is okay, this is actually in between, because this is when Vol'jin is kind of like the leader of the Horde for a little while. So this was earlier, I guess, definitely than war crimes, but it says, "War is coming. Vol'jin, courageous leader of the Darkspear tribe. His strength and cunning are unmatched even among the Horde's most exalted champions. Now on the legendary continent of Pandaria." So this was the lead-in book for Pandaria. I just skipped it by accident. "The troll chieftain faces his greatest trial yet, one that may redefine his purpose in the World of Warcraft. War Chief Garrosh's assassins strike at Vol'jin, leaving him at death's door. But fate smiles on the wounded Darkspear leader when the renowned Brewmaster Chen Stormstout transports him to the safety of an isolated mountain monastery. There, Vol'jin wrestles with old hatreds smoldering between the Alliance and the Horde as he struggles to recover alongside a mysterious human soldier. Yet this is only the beginning of Vol'jin's worries. Soon he becomes embroiled in an invasion of Pandaria launched by the Zandalari, revered trolls driven by dreams of conquest and power. This ancient tribe offers Vol'jin a chance to seize the glory that is the birthright of all trolls, an offer made even more tempting after Garrosh's brazen treachery. Amid these troubling events, Vol'jin is rocked by intense visions depicting his race's grand history. As he questions where his loyalties lie, he knows he must make a choice about his own destiny that could save his people or damn them to languish under Garrosh's heel in the shadows of the Horde. Okay, so then I think we have war crimes, which, okay, I'm not even gonna read like the back cover because the point is exactly what I'm gonna say, which is that Garrosh is on trial for his crimes that he's committed against pretty much everyone. So at the end of Warlords of Draenor expansion, I think that's when it was, yeah. There was the major raid where we had to like kill him, but we didn't kill him. We just between the Horde and Alliance, everything. So, due to all of his shenanigans and the fact that they spilled over into Pandaria and impacted the citizens of Pandaria as well, who are also pissed, that's essentially what happens there. War Crimes is my least favorite just because it's tied with Illidan for my least favorite, just because both of them are almost exact replicas of stuff that you already know if you've been paying attention. In War Crimes, 90% of the book, it felt like to me, were flashbacks to things that I had already read about happening, and they just went into so much detail about each of those things because some people may not have read about them. So for me, it was like rereading a book that I had already read, I guess, until like the end when things actually start happening in the plot of that book. So it was kind of like I was just waiting for something to happen. And I felt similarly when I was reading Illidan, which is the Legion expansion lead-in book, which, obviously features Illidan now as a demon hunter, which was the new race that came out. And don't get me wrong, this book is good. It's well written. There's nothing wrong with it per se, but if you've ever raided, what's it called? Black Temple. You already know this book. If you've read the dialogue and paid attention to like the lore in the game even, there's not much outside of this. Like most of what was in this, like I already knew. Visually, strategically, I knew what was going to happen in the plot. There wasn't a whole lot of surprise for me just because I pay attention and I already kind of know and have followed along with the stories. But if you really like Illidan, if you really like Burning Crusade, Black Temple, if you want to know more about the inception of demon hunters, this is still a really good book. Like I said, it's well written. It's just for someone who really follows along with the lore, there are only a small percentage of pages that you can read in that book that are going to be like new, and you're going to be like, oh snap, I had no idea, like whatever. And even then, when you started playing Legion, pretty much the same things that happened in the book were happening in the game. So but there were cool characters in there, and I did like the demon hunter characters that were created in that story. They were very interesting and memorable. I still have like visual images of what those demon hunters look like to me, so that's cool. And then this is Before the Storm, also by Christy Golden, and the back cover, as you can see, is actually artwork. So I'm gonna have to open this one and get to the cover flap here. Okay, Azeroth's reckoning has begun. Azeroth is dying. The Horde and the Alliance defeated the demonic Burning Legion, but a dire catastrophe is unfolding deep below the surface of the world. There's a mortal wound in the heart of Azeroth, struck by the sword of the fallen titan Sargeras in a final act of cruelty. For Anduin Wrynn, King of Stormwind, and Sylvanas Windrunner, War Chief of the Horde, and the Queen of the Forsaken, there is little time to rebuild what remains, and even less to mourn what was lost. Azeroth's devastating wound has revealed a mysterious material known as azerite. In the right hands, this strange golden substance existence is capable of incredible feats of creation. In the wrong ones, it could bring forth unthinkable destruction. As alliance and horde forces race to uncover the secrets of Azerite and heal the wound in the world, Anduin enacts a desperate plan aimed at forging a lasting peace between the factions. Azerite jeopardizes the balance of power, and so Anduin must gain the trust of Sylvanas. But the Dark Lady ever has her own machinations. For peace to be possible, generations of bloodshed and hatred must be put to rest. But there are truths that neither side is willing to accept, and ambitions they are loath to relinquish. As Alliance and Horde alike grasp for the Azerites' power, their simmering conflict threatens to reignite all-out war, a war that would spell doom for Azeroth. So this last book here is actually the one that led into the current expansion, the Battle for Azeroth, as you may have been able to tell if you play currently. And it was really good too, from all that I remember, but it was kind of bittersweet for me to read because I knew that I was quitting the game, or I had already quit, when I read this, and it was hard to know that I wouldn't be seeing what was going to happen next. So, on that note, I actually recently started playing again a little bit. I'm not raiding, I'm not in a guild even, just like my own bank guild, but I've just been kind of getting used to it again and enjoying the Battle for Azeroth expansion, which I had never seen. And I already put out one gameplay video not long ago, but I was very nervous, so I think that I can do a much better job of making an ASMR in-game kind of thing, and I definitely plan to do that when the time's right. I also might create a character on Classic and stream while I level up, just for fun. So if that's anything you want to see, let me know. And yeah, thank you for sticking around and talking about these books with me. These are some, like I said, over and over again, just really good visual, imaginatively creative books. And if you play WoW, it's just so cool to be able to follow along with what you're playing